Well, to the U.S. now, where gun control activists have proclaimed this Wear Orange weekend. And rallies taking orange as their emblem did begin yesterday in hopes of placing a spotlight on gun violence. Today, one of those protests is across the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City. That's where we find our Stephen D'Souza right now. So, Stephen, there has been essentially a year of protest against gun violence in the United States. So how is this weekend different from what we've seen following the Parkland shooting?
That's right, we saw millions take to the streets for the March for Our Lives, but this protest is a bit different. Before I answer your question, Michael, I just want to give you a sense of the size of this. You can see people stretching down there. That's the entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge, the pedestrian section. We'll just walk around here and show you as people cross the beginning of the march just passed us about a minute ago, and they were walking with a white casket to symbolize all of the people who have been killed in urban communities by gun violence. And that really is the message here, is that the organizers, the main organizer is a student from Harlem, Ramon Contreras, a high school student who felt that the previous marches and protests we've seen really didn't capture the essence and the problem that's happening in urban communities. Felt it was too much about schools and about banning things like AR-15s and getting background checks fixed, but said it really needs to be about social issues in urban communities. And so one of the speakers who's here is one of the Parkland students who feels the same way, Alea, and we had a chance to speak with her earlier to get a sense of their message today. Here's what she had to say.
Urban communities have been dealing with gun violence way longer than everyone at my school, and I think it's unfair that it finally was a conversation that everybody wanted to talk about after my school. And a lot of people that I spoke to after March for Our Lives, they felt like urban communities were underrepresented. You're a product of your environment, and what you see, you're going to, follow. So I think helping to end poverty and give urban communities the same amount of resources that, suburban communities get, I think that will help completely eradicate gun violence in urban communities.
Resources like money for education, for social services, healthcare, all the things that protesters here, Michael, say are very important to not just deal with gun violence, but also to deal with the urban issues that lead to people using guns.
And once again, we're hearing from a passionate young person who cares very deeply about these issues. But I do wonder, Stephen, we've seen so many protests in the wake of Parkland and now the Wear Orange weekend. How effective have these protests been?
Well, it's interesting because, since the Parkland protests, we've seen, an incremental move at the federal level, at the state level, depending what state you're at. Like in New Jersey, there's been a lot of movement towards gun control. Florida, some movement towards gun control. But really what people are saying is that it needs to happen at the grassroots level. And it was interesting, one of the people here is a father who lost his son in the Sandy Hook shooting and started one of the main organizations behind this march that's encouraging people to wear the orange that you see behind me. And he said that he's amazed to see all of the youth that are behind, and that he says that when it comes to the midterm elections in November, you're going to see a lot of youth voting, and they are going to be pushing for candidates who support their agenda. So that could be part of a wave of change that is still yet to come. And so while there have been incremental changes, it remains to be seen what the long-term impacts of all these protests will be.
Okay, Stephen, thank you for that. Our Stephen D'Souza along the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City.